Hello, I'm Major General Bob Dees, U.S. Army retired. I was privileged to serve in the Army for 31 years in many jobs at many levels, living the best of times and the worst of times with fellow soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. I entered the military in 1972 as a second lieutenant of infantry. My year group was the first to not be sent to Vietnam, although virtually all of my officer and non-commissioned officer leadership were Vietnam veterans. I learned from their searing experiences, their triumphs, their defeats, and the demons they brought home with them. I also learned that the two leader fundamentals that had been branded on my head at West Point, accomplish the mission and take care of the troops, accomplish the mission and take care of the troops, soon moved from my head to my heart to my very gut as a divine calling. In this quest to serve veterans and others after retirement, I wrote the Resilience Trilogy: Resilient Warriors, Resilient Leaders, and Resilient Nations, and then the Resilience God-Style book with associated study guide, video series, and training game. This calling continues today as I serve as president of the National Center for Healthy Veterans, recognizing that our nation's veterans are an untapped national treasure. Our purpose is to return healthy veterans to America, helping them through the community of fellow veterans, the benefit of dignified work, faith-based trauma recovery and life skills programs, and economic opportunity to achieve their highest life goals and service to others. With that as a little background on me, let us shift focus to our nation's veterans. It is fitting at this point to render honor to whom honor is due. I first honor our nation's war veterans who have laid it all on the line for nation, loved ones, and ultimately one another. One could ask, where would we be without our nation's veterans, as well as the many other veterans who have served so honorably and so selflessly? What if on June 6, 1944, our veterans had said, "It's too windy, too wet, let's try again tomorrow"? Or the same at Iwo Jima, or in Korea, or in Vietnam, or in Desert Storm, or in Bosnia and Kosovo, or in the latest conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq. But gratefully, Americans don't have to ask that question because our veterans have always been there to ensure we remain the land of the free and the home of the brave. I honor each of you, and I honor your families and friends who have likewise endured hardship, those bakers of cookies and senders of letters, the commanders of the giant stroller brigades who have also stood by your side, who have also served. Goodbye, Mommy, goodbye, Daddy. Then hopefully, the priceless sprint into the open arms of a returning soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine. I also honor the NEA BigRead Coalition in Queens, New York City, and beyond, which seeks to honor and assist war veterans in our midst with this important project. Finally, Times Square Church, which I call my home church, despite living in Texas. An amazing church with a very active military ministry for years, including many acts of assistance on behalf of New York's fighting 69th Guard formations and many veterans in need on the streets of New York City. So let me dive in. The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien is a fitting vehicle for this project, exposing the realities of war in a raw, visceral, gut-wrenching way. Through his diverse characters and his own autobiographical reflections, he artfully describes the various ways that humans cope with traumatic loss, death, and dying. The book credibly depicts the brutalities and the nobilities of war. From a literary perspective, it is a masterpiece of composition, intricate plot, and artful development of character and precepts for navigating life. More importantly, from an experiential perspective, The Things They Carried transports the combat veteran into a frighteningly familiar confrontation with war as they knew it, highlighting the things they carried: rucksacks, weapons, supplies, ammo, as well as fear, honor, grief, responsibility for others, guilt, friendship, and loss. This book also powerfully demonstrates story, both verbal and written, as the means to process the loss and trauma which accompany combat and so many other life traumas. While I can't possibly do justice to the many characters, concepts, and coping mechanisms laid forth in The Things They Carried, let me pass along some thoughts that may be useful to those who carry with them the invisible and visible wounds of war, as well as to those who seek to help our veterans move forward into a new sense of purpose and contribution. I will avoid existential questions such as why war, why me, why death, why not me, rather choosing to address issues such as what now, how to move forward, and very importantly, how to loosen my grip on the things that I have carried far too long. First, a few words about the nature of trauma which each of our war veterans have faced. We all get body slammed. It's part of the human condition. Jesus said, "In the world you will have tribulation." Combat veterans have certainly experienced trauma in their war zone or upon returning home, as well as in many other areas of life. You may have heard the question, when were you last in Vietnam? Or fill in any other conflict. The regrettable answer by many war veterans is last night. The trauma of war and many other life traumas cause loss. The response to loss is normally anger or despair and depression, sometimes lasting for days or for decades. While we never forget what happened, we can learn to process it differently, to look at it through a different lens, to learn that our pain can be turned to purpose as we see we can help others. Loss must be grieved. Tough, battle-hardened veterans have a hard time grieving, but stuffing it only drives the loss deeper, visiting havoc on our inner bodies and souls, creating holes in our stomachs and in our hearts, cultivating deep-seated bitterness which becomes a cancer of the body and the soul. Grieving takes time. Some of our war veterans have been grieving for decades. Some days are cloudy and stormy with graphic reminders, such as the anniversary of your alive day, or a deceased buddy's birthday, or a trigger which reminds you of the event, or you fill in the blank. Other days are sunny when you may sail through without the weight of remembrance. Under the best of conditions, grieving a serious loss or trauma takes months and years, not minutes or days. Under the worst of conditions, one can get stuck in grief. Gratefully, even if you have been stuck for a long time, there are ways to get unstuck. There are ways to loosen our tight grip on pain, loss, anger, bitterness, depression, and despair. Ways to loosen our grip on the things we have been carrying for far too long. If you're a veteran who is down and out, perhaps homeless or unable to hold down a job or constantly racked by physical or mental pain, you may think it is too late to bounce back, to regain vital optimism, to learn to sing a new song. This is dead wrong. Each of our nation's veterans is a national treasure, no doubt surprising to many of you, but you have so much to offer. You have mountains to climb, opportunities to seize, dreams to be realized, relationships to be treasured, younger people to mentor. We veterans have an important mission, a purpose to identify and live up to the full God-given potential for which each of us was created. This is not easy, but it is possible. There are a number of coping mechanisms which our author Tim O'Brien highlights, such as gallows humor, anger, disengagement, fake nonchalance, and camaraderie. A person of faith, such as the Christian Kiowa in The Things They Carried, has additional resources such as prayer, holy text, and confidence in God's protection. Psalm 57:2 refers to hiding under the shelter of God's wings until the destruction passes by. Those who have experienced the terror of incoming artillery know what I'm talking about. Psalm 91, known as the Soldier Psalm, is another biblical text which has comforted military people for centuries. It says, "He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust, for it is He who delivers you from the snare of the trapper and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with His pinions, and under His wings you may seek refuge. His faithfulness is a shield and a bulwark. You will not be afraid of the terror by night, or of the arrow that flies by day, of the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, or the destruction that lays waste at noon." Such words from Psalm 91 instill courage and comfort in the toughest of times. Or I suspect many of our war veterans have clung to the words of Psalm 23 in their darkest hours. "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." Let me close with a couple of suggestions and a final story. First, we must all lean into forgiveness and gratitude. This is hard, but it is the only healthy way forward. It is critical to forgive God, forgive self, and forgive others. Bitterness, the opposite of forgiveness, is the poison we often drink to kill somebody else. A venom as though bitten by a poisonous snake, which we must purge through forgiveness. Likewise, it is critical to achieve gratitude, allowing us to gain altitude over the quicksand of woulda, coulda, shoulda, and ungrateful toxins. Secondly, it is critical to turn our pain into purpose by comforting others with that which we have been comforted. I refer to this as the stewardship of pain. The true sign of healing and forward progress for each of us is when we recognize that we are able to help others on their life journeys. You can learn more about these concepts and many others at resiliencegodstyle.com and healthyveterans.org. Now let me close with a final story. I'd given a talk to a group of 5,000 men at a church in Virginia. After telling them some of the same things I've mentioned to you today, I challenged them to come forward to the front of the church to drop their baggage, to let go of the mental, spiritual, and emotional wounds that they had carried far too long. After my invitation for men to step out of their seats and courageously come forward, there was a pregnant pause. Maybe they didn't hear me or understand. Then I saw him at the back of the church, white beard, halting limp, and a 1st Cavalry Division ball cap, bright yellow patch with a black diagonal stripe. Vietnam War veteran. He started moving slowly down the aisle toward the front of the church. Soon other men in the audience noticed him as well. "You can do it. Proud of you. Thanks for your service, brother." About halfway down, a man jumps out of his seat and helps the grizzled veteran walk the rest of the way. By now, the men were cheering, "You can do it. You can do it." Soon other veterans, also wanting to loosen their grip on the things they carried, followed in his wake. Arriving at the steps up to the stage, the veteran dropped to his knees, held his arms wide, and loosened his clenched fist, opening his hands to release years of anger, bitterness, guilt, and false guilt, and plain old stuff that had weighed him down for so long. He then prayed, asking for God's help and the help of others. It was a day of liberation for this Vietnam veteran and so many others. As a footnote to this story, the next year I saw the same veteran, white beard, 1st Cav ball hat, but now he had a young veteran, a new friend at his side, and a renewed sense of purpose and downright joy. To conclude, it is sometimes useful to reflect on the things we have carried in war and other traumas of life. Even more transformative, however, is discovering how to let go of the things we have carried. May this become a reality for all of us. God bless each of you, and God bless America.